All right, chapter 10, some reflections on the Creator. In chapter 2, we looked at matter with a big microscope. The more we looked, the more we enlarged, and the less we found. We ended up with a void permeated by pulsating energy fields. Even the most solid matter, the one that imparts most of the mass to it, the nucleus of the atom, which at first appeared as a solid grain of matter, upon a better look dissolved into a vortex of pulsating fields. Thus, we found a void to be the common denominator of all matter, its ground substance, so to speak. We human beings consider ourselves to be made up of solid matter. However, by now we know that we are just an interference pattern of waves that is changing with time. Or in other words, we are a four-dimensional hologram. The base for the hologram is the void that permeates and connects all creation. We have heard of this void before. That is how we have described the absolute. As we look at the pulsating energy fields, we ask ourselves what would happen if we should slow down the pulsation of the energy fields or stop their pulsations altogether. The answer is that we would get back our void or the absolute. It is as though the wind that has raised the ripples over the face of the sea of the absolute has stopped blowing. Calm has set in, and the face of the sea is smooth again. There is no motion, therefore, no time, and no matter. The absolute is there, undisturbed. Remember that this absolute is pure consciousness combined with intelligence, as mentioned in chapter 5. We can see now that in order to reestablish manifest creation, we have to be able to somehow to rattle or vibrate the surface of the absolute. This is no simple task, and we would not even know how to begin. But that is, of course, what creators are for. You may recall that the ripples on the surface of the sea of the absolute in the fine relative, figure 33a, are so small and of such a high frequency as to become invisible. The absolute is both in a state of rest and at the same time an enormous potential energy. Similarly, we have seen how infinite velocity has become a state of rest, how the birth of matter occurs simultaneously and in the same place as its death. Creation and destruction are simultaneous. Degeneration carries renewal in its core. We know that the end of time is its beginning. In short, we find that there is a level in nature at which all extremes become reconciled and merged. It is on this level that black and white, good and evil, merge into one isness. This is also where the ultimate truth lies. The truth is not black or white, it is both. The pairs of opposites of the lower levels merge on the highest level. We tend to view nature through a tiny slot from a narrow angle. Others see it from another angle and describe it in a different language. It sounds different, but it's not. The universe is so rich in diversity that almost anything one says about it is correct, provided one takes a broad enough view. We have tried our hand before at designing nature spirits. Let us see now whether we can follow the actions of the creator of the universe. We shall try to peek over his shoulder while he works. The scenario would run something like this. In the tremendous, boundless, infinite dark void, something stirs. A very great volume of the void has decided to move and is defining its boundaries. This enormous consciousness intelligence is separating itself from the continuum so that it can start acting. It has thus become an individualized entity. It contains tremendous amounts of energy because the state of the absolute is a state of highest potential energy. It is a state of rest of the pendulum. Now the creator has to settle down and start to draw up plans of what to do within his real estate, which is his body. He sits back in his cosmic armchair and contemplates. He realizes that unless he can produce a consciousness equal to himself in all qualities, he may never know what he himself is all about. So he sets out to decide on the rules of the game, that is, the laws of nature as we know them. He invents the laws of evolution. Evolution will refine consciousness to a point at which it will resemble him in all attributes. He will start with matter of low consciousness, make it more and more complex, and watch the emergence of the first intelligence that can contemplate itself. This would mirror one of his basic attributes and would be quite a milestone in his development. Let us not forget that all these processes are occurring inside him in his subjective time. He will have to invent the most diverse creatures, the most diverse situations, and the most diverse events, then have his creatures go through all these possible situations and interact in all the possible ways. When all his different being will have gone through all the possible situations and interacted in all the possible ways, then he will know what he is capable of. He will then know himself. He uses the duality of good and evil as a catalyst to speed up the interactions. Good stands for the knowledge of his laws and evil for the ignorance of his ultimate laws. In other words, that which is in harmony with his laws and helps the process of evolution is good, and that which slows it down is evil. However, he manages to utilize both in the interest of evolution. Their constant interaction speeds up the very process of evolution. For the more evolved creatures, free will is built into the system so that they can eventually become co-creators. While the more simple creatures go through a present event matrix, the more evolved ones can choose from a number of possible paths. But once chosen, each path has its end result predetermined so that it fits in with the general event matrix while still allowing for much variety. An event matrix can be visualized as field patterns of diverse shapes within space-time. They are embedded within the space-time in a certain sequence that best fits the evolution of consciousness. These fields either stimulate, balance, or depress certain tendencies within our psyches. When it so happens that on its way through the expanding jet, the Earth crosses a stress-producing event matrix, the result will be that certain segments of mankind, the ones most susceptible to it at the moment, will be agitated, resulting in a possible war. If the event matrix happens to be one that will produce a calming effect, then a period of peace will result. If the event matrix of war has an elongated sausage shape, figure 50, then as our planet crosses it the first time, we may have a war fought with clubs, while the next time around it may be fought with muskets, and the third time around bombs may be used. The event is the same, only technology has changed. The causes behind the war event are always the same: greed for more wealth and territory, hatred, intolerance, etc. The event sausage will have the stimulating frequencies to evoke these emotions, and as they stimulate our endocrine system, these events will tend to occur. Remember how the full moon causes the emotionally unbalanced people to commit crimes. This is a similar effect, only on a grand scale. A long event sausage may be the cause behind the saying, history repeats itself. At the beginning, the creator watches with aloof amusement as his creatures go through the events like a flow of animated matter. However, somewhere down the path of evolution, consciousnesses will arise that will draw his attention. These will be creatures who not only contemplate themselves but start contemplating him. When a creature has reached a level of development at which he understands his real makeup and perceives that thou art that, then he becomes self-realized. The whole scheme of creation becomes transparent to him, and henceforth he will watch himself act within the scheme, but at the same time remain separate from his actions. This is analogous to the way the creator operates, acting but at the same time remaining separate and uninvolved in the action. When a creature gains this attribute of the creator, he will appreciate it. He will set aside such a unit of consciousness and say to him, "Here, do this." It may be just doing little chores at first, but sooner or later such a unit of consciousness will start guiding the evolution of other consciousnesses. That is, the being becomes a co-creator and eventually a minor god. As time goes by, more consciousnesses reach higher levels, angels, humans, or non-humans, but the goal is not accomplished until out of his myriad creatures emerges a consciousness that can become him, his double. Once he has duplicated himself, he knows himself, and he has succeeded in evolving his consciousness. That is as great as he himself. And so he closes down his shop, absorbing into himself all his manifest creation, and returns into the void. Until now, we have been trying to second-guess the thoughts of the Creator and planning and organizing the universe in his subjective space-time. We have to emphasize that the events described until now did not yet take place in objective space-time. In other words, they were only his thoughts and were not yet manifest. You may remember from Chapter 4 that the highest level of consciousness occurs when the angle equals 90 degrees. That is, when the subjective time overlaps the objective space. This means that the subjective time is infinitely long, and a consciousness in that state fills all space or is omnipresent. In Chapter 9, we know that in this state of consciousness is also omniscience. From Chapter 9, we know that in this state, the consciousness is also omniscient. That is the angle or state at which the Creator is and thinks his universe. As we said before, once he has decided to move, he begins by defining his boundaries. His real estate, so to speak, he does this by means of light. A sheath of light appears and outlines his body. This is not a light as we know it, but of a level of energy peculiar to him. It acts as a container for what we know as our manifest space-time. His body is very likely an ovoid that resembles an egg or a seed, and its size would be naturally the size of the universe. All the above happenings are occurring in the subjective space and subjective time of the Creator, since he is that being having the highest possible level of consciousness. His subjective time is therefore stretched out very much. In fact, he has an infinite amount of time to accomplish all that we are talking about. But to us simple mortals who would be watching the action somehow from a distance, all this would occur suddenly because we spend most of our conscious time in objective time-space. Therefore, while the Creator can take his time to contemplate, design, and construct his universe at leisure, to us it would appear in a big bang. Suddenly the whole thing would just be there, and in order to find out objectively what is there, we have to start exploring his creation in our slowpoke way, bit by bit, and get ourselves entangled in the familiar space-time or time-like universe in which things happen in a more or less ordered sequence. Let us return now and watch the Creator do his thing in his subjective space-time. We have watched him outline his real estate, which was enveloped in a sheath of light. Within this shell, his energy is at first diffuse. Next, his energy starts to polarize. There is a spatial separation. Spatial? It's not spatial, it's spatial. Separation of positive and negative energy, figure 51. This energy we shall call protomatter, or the precursor of our matter. We now have positive and negative protomatter. Let us say that the positive energy has accumulated at the tip of the ovoid, the negative one at the bottom of it. A differential in energy or potential has thus arisen along the axis of the ovoid. In this way, the relative aspect of the absolute is born. This is now a difference between the outside and the inside of the shell of light, and a difference in energy between the two ends of the ovoid. A duality has arisen where there was none before. So I want to just finish it. I'm just going to finish it. The aha moment. In the meantime, more and more energy is being built up at the poles of the ovoid. Ovoid. I'm going to call it an ovoid. Ovoid sounds stupid. Ovoid is trembling from the great accumulation of potential energy, and then suddenly, zap, a great spark flashes like a bolt of lightning across the void within the shell of light. A great thunderclap follows the first sound, and the first act of fertilization has taken place, figure 52a. The impact of this discharge sets in motion the reservoir of negative protomatter, which rises in a great column as it is drawn to the opposite pole, figure 52b. It spreads out at the tip of the ovoid shell and runs down, hugging its walls back to the bottom of the shell, figure 52c. It continues to flow in the central column up to about half the height of the ovoid. Here, its energy exhausted, the column drops back into the negative energy pool at the bottom of the ovoid, except for one drop of matter that separates from the column and remains floating, balanced between the two poles, 52D. The flow of protomatter has prepared, or we may say, seeded the protospace for the appearance of the kind of physical matter we know. The flow of protomatter has outlined the volume to which our time-space will be confined. The sound of the great thunderclap is still reverberating within the shell. This is the aha moment of the creator. He has contemplated and thought for a long time, and now finally and suddenly he has seen the whole design in all its complicated detail, and in one great flash of creative insight he made the potential forms of the whole creation appear. This great sound, which contains all the possible frequencies, continuously reverberates within the shell, creating an infinite number of interference patterns of potential beings and even matrices. It outlines all that the creator has visualized himself to be, and so, having prepared the form, the space-time bound, visible and physical and non-physical relative universe will appear. Matter will gradually fill the forms or molds created by the interference patterns in protospace. These forms and event patterns have been visualized and seen by the creator in their entirety from the beginning of time to the end of time, that is, starting from the white hole and ending in the black hole. His focus has now become the droplet floating in the middle of the shell. The action of this droplet, the black and white hole, reflects the previous flow of protomatter through it. It becomes a focus, a source producing a flow of physical matter in the form of radiation to fill the event matrices. The interference patterns prepare by the reverberating sound. This is the nucleus or the egg. It represents all the information about the universe in the condensed form, just as a seed represents a tree. The rest of the ovoid structure mirrors the same information in a manifest unfurled form, that is, the actual tree. Again, we apparently have two opposites, the seed and the tree, both containing the same information but in different form. One is potential form, reflecting the absolute, and one is a manifest unfurled form, representing the relative realities, or the absolute in action. We now know that the purpose of evolution is to produce consciousness of higher and higher order. The universe, a teaching and learning machine, its purpose is to know itself. Knowledge is freely available in the universe like every other natural resource. It is there for everyone who is willing to make the effort to take it. We can poke around in our sequential objective time-space, or we can take the intuitive subjective time-space route. Both are needed to get us there. All creatures in all galaxies are going through their event patterns in this enormous hologram called the universe. We should remember that each element of volume in the hologram contains all the information about the whole grand design. In other words, knowledge is structured in consciousness. This is, again, nature's little hint. Study the micro and you'll find the macro reflected in it. Or if we study ourselves thoroughly, we may just find the design of the universe reflected in us. There is no need to repeat the intuitive reader There is no need to repeat to the intuitive reader what has been pointed out before, that an egg and all seeds reflect this basic design of the universe. Energy flows through the center of the egg along its long axis, turns around, and flows back over itself, forming an outside field of energy. But then again, this may mean that the universal egg is just the seed produced by a much vaster system, in which the egg of our universe is just a tiny cell among many cells, and that vaster system in turn is only a cell of an even vaster system, and that even much vaster system is again just a speck in an even vaster system. And summary. Our objective reality is composed of a void filled with pulsating fields. If we stop the pulsations of the fields, we get back the absolute. The absolute is where opposing extremes become reconciled and are merged. This is the level at which the creator functions. The creator draws up the plans for his universe. These are the laws of nature, the rules of the game. His goal is the evolution of consciousness. He uses opposing forces of good and evil to stimulate evolution. Even matrices are fields within the universe that affect our endocrine glands in particular pre-programmed ways so that the most susceptible portion of mankind will behave in certain expected patterns. When a unit of consciousness has developed to a point at which it understands that it is part of the creator will set him aside and assign to him some jobs to do. Eventually, such a consciousness will develop into a co-creator. The creation of a universe starts by the separation of a part of the void, which is outlined by a sheath of light, to form an ovoid shell. Then polarization or protomatter occurs. A discharge passes through the two poles of the ovoid and sets the protomatter moving. The black-white hole nucleus in the center is the source of all matter in the universe. It is possible that this universe is just a tiny cell in a much larger structure.